This is the Etiology podcast. I am your host, Elka Kubaku, licensed social worker and psychotherapist. In this podcast, we explore divisive issues around food, health, and body image with the goal of mending relationships within the eating disorder recovery professional community and creating a space where a multiplicity of perspectives can coexist harmoniously. This podcast is uncensored and encompasses the political and ideological spectrum. If you believe something you hear is harmful or misinformed, please be respectful to the speaker. And also, feel free to reach out about recording another episode on the same topic from your vantage point. My hope is that if, as professionals, we can hold each other's stories with respect and compassion, we'll be better able to do so for our clients. Periodically, I come across social media posts or comments questioning the legitimacy of work by a non-credentialed author, healer, or influencer. These questions stem from the fact that as mental health becomes increasingly recognized as its own discipline, standards are developed to monitor and legitimize it. Academic degrees and clinical licensure help ensure credibility, ethical standards, and accountability. Scientific study moves therapy from the subjective experience of the practitioner to empirical observations of an intervention's effectiveness. Seeking mental health treatment puts a person in the vulnerable position of sharing their most raw and painful experiences with a stranger. All of these measures can inform who to trust to provide safe and effective care. And yet, while modern psychotherapy is a relatively new invention, psychosocial and spiritual healing have been part of societies perhaps since the beginning of human civilization. The complexity of the human mind makes it impossible for any one group or groups to claim a monopoly on understanding how we heal. Many people in recovery encounter the limitations of professional fields like therapy or dietetics, raising the question, what is the role of coaches, spirituality, and alternative paths to healing? How can we open our minds to healing in all of its forms, wherever it may be found, while also protecting ourselves and others from the harm caused by unskilled or unethical practice? In this episode, Schiek and I discuss the role of coaching, spirituality, and alternative paths to healing. Haley shares her journey encountering the limitations of traditional treatment. Then, on the advice of her dietitian, seeing an alternative healer with initial skepticism, and finally experiencing the profound effects of this type of work firsthand. Haley shares how she now integrates energy healing, understanding of emotional frequencies, and chakra yoga into her work, using what helped her to support others. Haley is a certified professional coach, yoga teacher, and peer educator who specializes in eating disorder recovery and psychospiritual wellness. She is the owner and founder of Kosana Coaching. Kosana is made up of words with Latin roots, ko meaning with, and sana meaning health, wholeness, and healing. Kosana speaks to Haley's belief that the deepest healing happens in community when we work together. Having overcome anorexia, binge eating, and bulimia herself, Haley integrates her professional training in Western psychology and Eastern spiritual practice with her lived experience in eating disorder recovery to empower clients to overcome self-hate, reclaim their health, and achieve tangible recovery goals that enable them to live a pleasurable, present, values-driven life, free from the horrific cycle of dieting for weight loss and the fear of losing control with food. Haley's recovery programs focus on restoring hope and personal power, as opposed to promoting discipline and control. Haley facilitates discussions about health using a holistic, systemic lens, taking particular care to understand how her clients' sociocultural status, gender, and identity intersect with external power structures to impact their mental, physical, and spiritual wellness. Haley has a decade of experience teaching yoga and facilitating classes and workshops across the United States, from the coral pink sand dunes of southern Utah to oceanfront classes in Puerto Rico. For Haley, yoga is about connecting with the heart, regulating the nervous system, slowing down the mind, and caring for the body. Understanding that each individual is a source of divine knowledge, Haley facilitates classes that encourage students to connect to the teacher within. Hi, Haley. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Alka. I'm stoked to be having a conversation with you.
Yeah, me too. So, can you start by just telling me a little bit about what you do in the eating disorder recovery space?
Yes, so I approach recovery very holistically. I am a certified professional eating disorder recovery coach, yoga teacher, and certified peer educator on healthy relationships. So I
Mhm.
kind of cover a wide array of topics, but most folks, the entry point to folks coming to see me is they're struggling with their body image they're struggling with food, they're struggling with the way that they move through the world.
Mhm.
So a lot of my work is talk-based coaching, one-on-one. I also do groups, which I love. And
Mhm.
I really like to bring in not just the philosophy of yoga to everything that I'm doing
Mhm.
with folks, but also nervous system regulation practices. So I do a lot of that in the moment in talk-based sessions because it's, we we get worked up talking about these things and we got to bring it back down to move forward.
Yeah, very cool. You had told me when we spoke last time that you've gotten some people who were skeptical of what you're doing as a coach. Can you tell me about that? What, or give me an overview on what you've heard from people about the role of coaches and then how you experience your role?
Yes. So it's a mixed bag how people respond to the idea of recovery coaches, which originated with substance use addiction as a form of support from people who have already successfully overcome their addictions and are now looking to help other people. And there's an emerging body of evidence that suggests that's a really effective form of support.
Yeah.
And there's not as much research on its utility in supporting folks from EDs or disordered eating. But in my own
Yeah.
experience, I have seen it to be highly effective. And I think where the controversy kind of lies is that you don't need a certification, you don't need a license, you don't, it's a very gray space.
Yeah.
So that does pose like risk of harm. That
Hmm.
does make it harder to know the kind of professional you're working with. If you work with a therapist, they are licensed, they have gone through an accredited program. And that's not to say every therapist is an incredible therapist.
Right.
I've worked with dozens of therapists over my lifetime, and
Yeah.
it's a mixed bag of who is effective and a good fit for me. And then I've worked with people who have no college education, who
Yeah.
work with completely different systems of healing, and they have had the most profound impact on my life. So I
I've seen
think there is like maybe a few things going on
that.
with that on the therapist side, which we can get into. But overall, I would say that people have a very positive response to bringing a recovery coach onto someone's
Hmm.
team, and collaborating with dietitians, with therapists, with medical providers is, I mean, it's a comprehensive form of care, and that really just aids the client in the end.
Hmm. Yeah. So there's some skepticism just in the sense that because there's not accreditation or oversight, there's no, like, you could market yourself as anything. And you've been working as part of larger teams where it's pretty clear what your role is and you're not the exclusive support.
Yes. I have, however, also been the exclusive support, and that typically is when people might not meet the criteria for a clinical eating disorder, or they have kind of been through the rigmarole of treatment programs, therapists, all
Yeah.
of that stuff, dietitians. They
Hmm.
they kind of might know what they
Hmm.
need to do, but they
Yeah.
don't have the willingness or accountability to really implement it and make it
Hmm.
tangible. But they know they just don't have the embodied
Yeah.
practice and understanding. And so as a
Hmm.
coach, I get to be on a peer level. There's a different power dynamic there because I'm
Yeah.
not a licensed provider. I am a peer
Hmm.
with a lot of training and experience, both professional and lived. But it's different when I'm talking about accountability
Yeah.
with my client because I think there's less shame on their end, which is like the biggest
Mhm.
blocker to healing that there possibly could be.
Yeah.
Because I get it. I've been through it
Hmm.
and I'm equally
Hmm.
human. I'm just in a different place in relation to my ED.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that with clients who I've worked with, especially in higher levels of care that had coaches as well, that sometimes there is more of an openness and just I can relate to this person as a friend almost, but in a friend in a supportive role.
Yes. And I love that. I love that you say friend because I really do feel that I'm a friend in recovery. I'm here to be a partner in healing. My coaching business is called Co Co meaning with, Sana meaning health, wholeness, and healing. And I chose that name because it speaks to my belief that we really heal best when we heal together and we heal in
Yeah.
community. We cannot overcome these challenges on our own. And if you're only working with someone like a dietitian or a therapist, well, you might only be seeing them for an hour a week. So what about the rest of your life?
Yeah.
How are you doing? So I get to fill in really important gaps that I have seen really help people move forward.
Yeah. What language is that, Kusana?
Kosana is Latin, but I recently moved to Puerto Rico and I recently learned that Sana is Spanish for healing as well. So
Oh,
it's been really fun to learn all of the language connections.
cool. What does that look like when you're talking about filling in those gaps beyond an hour a week? Like, what kind of role are you in on a day to day? What does that look like?
In the past, I have served as a person who provides meal support. I have
Mhm.
helped with closet clean out, when your body changes in recovery. It has to. It's just part
Yeah.
of it. And even if you're not in recovery, your body's still changing. Um, but getting rid of old clothes can be challenging. So having someone to sit with you, go through the memories, kind of
Yeah.
understand what the emotional attachment is to certain items and work towards releasing that so you can create space for who you are now and who you're becoming, quite
Cool.
literally, to be comfortable. So I've done that. I do a lot of like psychoeducation support groups,
Hmm.
which I think provides really nice community for people in addition to just like little practical bits of info that make the
Hmm.
idea of recovery more tangible and
Yeah.
like step by step. So at the end of the day, I feel like I'm providing tangible steps
Hmm.
that help people understand like, okay, what does recovery literally mean on a weekly
Hmm.
basis, on a day-to-day basis? How am I implementing my meal plan? What does it look like moving my body? So I mean, I love it when I get to do yoga with my folks because I have personally seen with myself how much my life changed when I chose to
Hmm.
live back in my body and move it from a place of loving care instead of control.
Hmm. Tell me about you said you do some chakra yoga stuff. Tell me about that. And I
Yeah.
realized as you were saying that we had connected in the past on Facebook. Uh, I had like posted something and you wrote, and I was like, oh, cool, I'm a yoga teacher too. What is that? Tell me about that.
Yes, I love that. We were destined to connect, but chakra yoga, energy healing. I learned about the chakras in 2020,
Hmm.
and I worked with an energy healer after spending probably, I think, 4 years with a really incredible registered dietitian. But she hit a wall with me. She literally was like, "I cannot help you anymore. I couldn't stop binge eating. The pendulum of like restricting and binge eating just
Yeah.
kept swinging wildly." And it terrified me when the person who I admired the most and relied on the most for support um, told me she couldn't help me anymore. But she said, I think you need to go see this woman. She's a bit woo-woo, so have, some
Okay.
faith. Like this is a different
Mhm.
system, but she had personally gone to her, had profound experiences. And I was like, all right, if Claudia will go to this energy lady, then I will go to this energy lady too.
Mhm.
And it changed everything. It changed everything. So it helped me kind of understand my nervous system and my energy system in a different way than like the traditional psychodynamic model, which I had studied
Mhm.
in my undergraduate program.
Yeah.
So it helped me understand how and where my energy, my emotions, my thoughts were getting kind of caught up in time, mostly in the past. So I had these wounds that had all these energy cords that were attached to people and objects and events, and I just needed to clean it up because I was anywhere but the now, and I was a walking ball of shame. So working with her, I came to really understand how the universe, I mean, everything is vibrating, everything on an atomic level has a frequency. We can change our frequency. Our frequency, if we're not, that in tune, changes on its own. And then we're kind of being driven by our energies instead of
Yeah.
influencing them ourselves. So understanding all of this, which I've been working with this for, I guess, 5 years now. I developed a 7-week energy healing program that combines yoga, coaching, and energy work. And I love it for myself. I designed the program for myself. And then when I was going through it, I realized, oh, okay, this actually might be useful to other people too.
Hmm. Okay. So there's something that I'm hearing beyond when you talk about with yoga inhabiting your body, especially for many of us with eating disorders or history of eating disorders where we're very disconnected. So I hear that. And that's something that I feel like I understand it and it's becoming more widely known, or I've heard that so many people experience that. When you talk about the energy field, um, and like we all have vibrations, and if we're not consciously working with it, we're still being controlled by it. Tell me about what was that process of discovering that or learning that like for you? What was your initial reaction to it? And when did it click?
I'm like smiling and laughing just because I haven't thought about my initial reaction to it in a while. And
Mhm.
it's interesting to reflect on just how different I feel now.
Yeah.
But mind you, when I started this energy work in 2020, I had already been a yoga teacher for 4 years.
Hmm.
But I had really strayed from the path of yoga due to my eating disorder. Yoga became a form of exercise. Like
Hmm.
I went through the program young to become a teacher. I think I started at age 15.
Wow.
And so while I appreciated the philosophical and spiritual concepts, part of me was just too young to integrate and embody them. And the ED was already taking hold.
Hmm.
Um, and so then yoga just became another way to control the
Hmm.
body.
Yeah.
And I was very skeptical of the idea of energy, of Reiki, even though I had been, trained in Reiki as well. I just didn't, I felt too silly to put any
Hmm.
trust in that idea.
Yeah.
Um, and besides, I was trained as a scientist in psychology. So everything about it just screamed, this can't be, what it is.
Yeah.
Um, but going to this energy lady, Sue, who I just love so much, she in the first session brought forward things that I was like, how could you be communicating with my energetic essence, my spirit, and be uncovering and pulling out these words like out of thin air, that I need to address, that I'm having an energetic reaction to. Like I'm sitting here within myself feeling these certain chords get tugged is the best way I can put it. These shifts in kind of when you get like prickles up your spine or like a sudden tightness in your chest. It was kind of like that. And it was like, okay, wow, like what she is saying is having a direct energy impact on me. Like this resonates. But the skepticism was so big, and I had these wounds with the idea of God or source or faith. Like the idea of having faith. I mean, I didn't have faith in myself at that point. So how could I have faith in a larger, higher source power system than me?
Yeah.
Um, so my initial reaction was very skeptical and wounded from my Catholic upbringing. But
Okay.
we worked through that and it was profound. I accessed such a different level of trust in life and in my ability to just be present and be here now and not always be trying to protect myself by going back to the past and remembering things or going to the future and trying to worry and prevent and plan. I was able to kind of let my guard down a little more and say, okay, like I am going to just try to align with what I feel is in my highest good, just in every
Hmm.
moment, like I don't know the big picture here, but I can feel within myself what the next right step is for me. Not right or wrong in that way, but just what is the next aligned action for me to take here. And that process of trusting, of just trying to be in alignment, of, learning to meditate and be with myself, learning to be still enough and present enough within myself to start to pick up on my energy shifts, my emotion shifts, my mind and thought shifts. It changed literally. I mean, we're here 5 years later and it has changed my whole life. And that has enabled me to go on to help other people change theirs. So it's been a real interesting journey, to be frank.
Yes. Can you, I want to try to translate some things into the tangibles, which I know can be really hard to do with an experiential process. But I'm like recovering from a cough, so my voice is a little off. But
All good.
When you're at Sue, that was her name. This
Yes.
healer, walking in a little bit skeptical with your own sort of religious or wounds associated with faith and religion, and you're hearing her say something, feeling some shifts internally that let you know this is real or something is happening here. Can you tell me what was she doing or saying that was triggering these shifts, and describe to me a little bit more what those shifts were experienced like for you?
Yes. So Sue works with her fingers and her pores to test if something is yes, no. She can kind of she'll ask to start. Okay, do you want to tell me what's going on? Do you want to catch me up on things? Or do you want me to just go to your spirit and see what is kind of going on and available for us to work with today? And definitely in the beginning, I was like, go to the spirit, because you got stuff to prove to me, lady. You got to prove that you can. I'm not telling you anything, you know?
Yeah.
And so she would go. She would kind of start just doing this. She would be looking at, she had many charts. She had many binders and tools that she always used. And she would be looking at her charts, and she would be testing with her fingers, rubbing her thumb along her pointer finger to feel for changes in her pores, sensing shifts in her own energy, which is communicating with my energy, if something is authentic or true for me or not. So she would be pulling forward words like shame, mom, scarcity, money, and then she'd be like, okay, it's an event. Okay, when was the event? 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 years ago. Okay, is anything coming up for you? And I can't tell you the number of times when she would do that, and I would go pull out my calendar and be like, no way, I got into a fight with so and so about finances that weekend, and it sent me spiraling, and then I felt shit, all the things. So there's just so many times where she would put together a super vague picture, and within me I could feel that, like, I call it a consciousness prick, like a knowing of, ooh, okay, like that's something to pay attention to, and that's something that's real for me. I need to pause here. So she helped me kind of start to trust and understand that more subtle experience, and then translate it into words so I could share with her, and she could help me learn how to release it. So once we brought forward the fact that I had shame about pretty much everything, and that I was exclusively living in the past and being pulled around by all of these traumatic events and all the things, right, then she did something that really pissed me off, like, a lot, and it took me a while to be willing to heal like that, because in therapy it's so different. So what she did, that at first I was just like, no way, no, it can't be that easy, I refuse to believe this. She would have me take my hand, which has a magnetic property, and she would have me run my hand from the center of my chest up over my face, over my head, over to the back of my head, and back down the front. So clearing my meridians in this way, while thinking or saying out loud, I release my shame.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the process of cutting energetic cords, of freeing yourself from the energies that are tangled in the past, to bring yourself fully to the now. And if you are someone who is attuned with your energy, you can sometimes even feel, if you kind of are moving your hands together in a ball, you can feel a little resistance between your hands. And that is like the human energy field.
Mm-hmm.
And so using the hand to clear it and cut the cords, sometimes I'll also do the scissors if it's something that feels really sticky,
Yeah.
with my fingers. But it was that simple. It was just like, I'm releasing this. I'm freeing myself from this. And one time, this was wild.
It feels so simple.
It
It
well,
feels
it
too
was too
easy.
simple. Exactly. It was too simple. But the thing is, life is really simple and we make it really complicated. And I love
Mm-hmm.
psychology and it's important and there's a place for it and therapy is important and there's a place for it. And in my experience, I could have gone to therapy forever. I
Mm-hmm.
could have just kept going and
Yeah.
not really just healed and let go. So this was just a different
Mm-hmm.
framework that spoke to me and enabled me to say, enough of this. I'm removing it. Like I am removing this obstacle so I can be here now and move forward. Um, so one time, and this is when I really started to believe in it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, one time I was working with her and we were talking about these girls I went to middle school with, Catholic school, and I was bullied and it was a tough time for my whole family. It was a small school, all the parents are friends. Um, and so it was hard for them too, seeing their kid hurting and navigating all of that. And so I didn't realize it, but my parents, especially my dad, held a lot of anger against the girls who treated me poorly. And that experience as a middle schooler has really shaped my self-esteem and the way I behave. And it's something that even to today, I still work to fully heal from and reorient from. But I was cutting the cords on the anger of the feeling of not belonging, the feeling of not being good enough. I was releasing God from blame, and the belief that I was abandoned by God. So I was releasing all of this. And that same
You did
day, I was
the
doing, yes, yes. It's so ingrained now that I just do it with my hand. It came back, so I was like, gotta clear that talking about it.
Yeah.
Um, Little did I know that that night, my dad was sitting on a tarmac in an airplane, states away, like across the country. And mind you, I was bullied in middle school, and I am now in my 20s when this is going on. So it's been years. But my dad is sitting on this plane, and he is furious about the girls from middle school and the bullying. He out of nowhere, he's just overcome with rage. He is thinking all of these thoughts that he's shocked by himself about these girls. And I didn't know this, but then I talked to him the next day and he was like, yeah, I was just thinking about Gianna and all the things that she said to you and how she made you feel. And I could have shaken her. I was so mad. And I
Wow.
haven't thought about them in so long. And I had a full body energetic, like tingles, prickles, my hair stood up, on the other line. Um, and was just like, Dad, like I released them yesterday. Like I forgave them. I am moving on and I cut those cords. And I didn't realize that maybe some of my cords were also attached to your cords and they're connected to those girls.
Mhm.
And so we now have an opportunity to release them together. But my own healing triggered something in him across the country.
Wow.
So at that point in time, there was no room for not having faith in the process for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so at that point, I went all in on the emotion frequency scale, which is not a scientifically validated scale, but it is a super useful visual for understanding the wavelength of different emotions. If we think about emotions, they are simply energy in motion. And so by their very nature, they will just move through the body if we let them.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that we're so dang uncomfortable feeling these frequencies and we don't know how to just simply tolerate them, that we
Yeah.
tend to do things to either numb, change, disassociate, whatever it is, and it ends up making it worse. And if we do that enough, then we develop things such as eating disorders, addictions, self-harm, and these emotions actually, instead of being processed, become our programming, and we lock them into the body and into our cells. And that creates illness. So it's super, super important that we just learn how to feel.
Yeah.
And that was, I think, what it really helped me do. And it helped me understand that, okay, I actually have an aversion to being happy. I actually have an aversion to self-acceptance. I have aversions to faith, because of, those past experiences. I didn't feel deserving, A, and B, I was really afraid to shine again in my life. I was afraid to love myself again, because when I last had really truly loved myself, it felt like I got pushed down a flight of stairs repeatedly, like people didn't
Mm-hmm.
want me to love myself. They didn't like that. And so I was afraid to fully commit to loving myself again and opening the door to happiness and healing. But Sue really gave me the confidence to say, I'm opening this door fully and I'm walking through it. And
Mm-hmm.
that really changed everything.
Yeah. There's a lot here that feels familiar and some things that feel new. So I want to run through what I'm understanding and what feels new. So when you talk about the emotions being energy in motion, and when we block that energy, that's when we get stuck in it or controlled by it. Um, and the work you're describing is, can we just let those emotions move through us instead of stopping them? Also, how you're describing the things that we carry from childhood and the beliefs that we absorb and then get sucked into. That all sounds familiar and very much in line with particular types of therapy, especially
Mm,
mindfulness and somatic type therapies. When you're describing to me the physical movements like that, doing your hand like that, or her sensing in her pores, how did you describe that? Like with her fingers, that feels very new. How do you conceptualize what that's doing? Is it clearing something physically? Is it a symbolic representation of what you're doing mentally? Tell me how you see that, or what are those movements?
I see it as both, because so if we look at the way illness is manifested, right, it starts as a disruption on an energetic level, like within our cells.
Mm-hmm.
If we're not talking, I think we get confused when we talk about energy, we immediately go woo woo. But like
Mm-hmm.
if we think about the atomic structure of the universe,
Mm-hmm.
protons, neutrons, they have electrical charges.
Yeah.
So we are made up of atoms that are electric. So we as humans are electrochemical beings.
Yeah.
And psychiatry works more with the chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
But there's this whole other energy piece that we have kind of ostracized and put on the back burner. But when we pull that forward, there's actually a lot to work with. And so when we talk about like the creation of illness, for me, like and I know that that language might be triggering for some people or uncomfortable. So I acknowledge that, but that's the language I'm going to use here, the creation of illness.
Mm-hmm.
It starts on a cellular level, misfunctioning.
Yeah.
And then, that's the energy. That's the way the energy is being metabolized. That is something's going wrong there. And
Yeah.
one way that we can cause our own energy in our cells to malfunction is by thinking
Mm-hmm.
thoughts, that then cause us to feel feelings that then cause us to behave in ways that might hurt ourselves or undermine our vitality or our ability to be present, such as using drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And then lo and behold, we have an addiction. And so it all starts in the non-physical
Yeah.
and then becomes physical. And so that would be the pathway That would be kind of how I would explain it. So it's becoming aware of the subtle energies, and there's a level beneath emotion, I think, that is there as well. But with a lot of my clients, I start at the emotion level, and use the emotion frequency chart by David R. Hawkins to help us understand, like, okay, you are in a space of shame and you chronically feel guilty and ashamed. How can we, choose guilt over shame? That's usually my first step with folks, because shame is, and this is something Sue said to me probably 200 times, shame is a useless emotion unless your goal is to not be accountable for your life. And that is because shame says, I am bad. I am bad. I can't do anything with that. If I'm bad, I can't change anything about myself or my life or the way that I'm operating. I can't be accountable for my life circumstances when I feel shame. However, if I have the courage to choose guilt over shame, I'm going to mindfully choose my emotions now at this point. I'm saying, okay, I recognize I feel ashamed. I'm going to choose to feel guilty about this situation. I binged. Let's give an example. Say I binged.
Yep.
I felt ashamed. Okay, I feel like I am bad. I am worthless. I am not good enough. No. Okay, I'm going to bump up to guilt. I feel bad that I hurt my body in this way, and I didn't choose to cope with a more healthy tool. And I'm physically uncomfortable right now. I feel bad about that. I'm going to choose guilt now.
Yep.
Then I can bump up higher. I can bump up to grief. Grief is a higher emotion on this scale than guilt or shame. So, all right, I'm going to start to actually feel the sadness underneath all of this about this process. Then I'm going to go even higher. I'm going to allow myself to feel angry about it, not at myself. Now, because I have such a good understanding of the larger systems at play that really perpetuate and enable and endorse disordered eating, such as, fat phobia and diet culture, I'm pissed. So now I have more energy, right? When we feel shame and guilt, those are really low frequency feelings. Like they get stuck in the body. They're dense. Like when you are depressed, you feel heavy.
Yep.
And when you feel depressed, you tend to feel sad, shame, guilt, apathy, low vibrating emotions. They make us heavy. Anger is a higher frequency. So already, if you're allowing yourself to feel angry, you are freeing your energy more and you're climbing the emotion frequency scale towards things like peace, joy, love, acceptance. So being willing to let go of the feelings that you have become so familiar with to experience new ones, like anger, like fear, like willingness and acceptance. I mean, it's interesting. I think when you've had the ED for long enough, you want to love yourself, but you're also terrified of what self-acceptance will bring to your life. And a lot of that's due to the internalized fat phobia and fear of the body changing. And if I accept myself, then I won't be accountable for taking care of myself. And, there's a lot of work to do there, which is totally doable. But a lot of us don't actually want to heal because we are afraid of what kind of power, right? High frequencies. A lot of us don't know how to tolerate high frequencies. A lot of us don't know how to live in these places of willingness, accountability, acceptance, peace. It's uncomfy at first. So back to the chakra yoga program, what I was noticing going through my own 7-week program was, I mean, first of all, every week, my external life would just match with the themes of that chakra, which was always mind blowing to me. But it just provided so many opportunities for healing. But the second thing I noticed was I would feel better and better every week. I could feel my frequency increasing. I could feel myself releasing what I needed to so that I could vibrate higher. That's when people are like, high vibes, like this is what people mean by high vibes. But when I would get up to the higher chakras, which are the spiritual centers, so the non-physical, right? The low chakras are denser, they're lower frequency, they are related to the physical earth energies. We reach the heart, it's a bridge between the physical and the non-physical. We get to these upper three centers, the throat, the third eye, and the crown. These are purely spiritual centers. So these are super high frequencies that we are working with here. And I would get to these places, and after the 7th week, it was like I couldn't handle it. And I would self-sabotage, I would binge again, all of those things. It was like I was so uncomfortable in this expanded state that I wanted to go back to my contracted, small way of being because that was familiar and safe. Even if I was so unhappy that way. So that's really the emotion healing process that she taught me and that I bring in with my clients.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Sedona method? As you're going through it just reminded me of that because I've heard the concept before of the, let's say, shame or apathy, especially being sort of lower frequency, and then grief, anger, the conceptualization, which it could be it's just used across different spiritual systems. But when you talk about low versus high frequency emotions, if I were to translate that into a language that is more commonly used or into how it's experienced, would you say it's like feeling more vibrant, energetic, alive?
100%. And light. You feel
Mhm.
light. Like, and that's where the joy is. I mean, if
Yeah.
you call forward a memory, I mean, for folks who are listening to this, yeah, call forward a memory of something that makes you sad
Hmm.
and just notice, like, okay, like what shifts are kind of happening very subtly.
Yeah.
And then if you call forward something that makes you really joyful, like a really happy memory or a place that you just feel really good or something you're excited about, notice that subtle change too.
Yeah.
And at least in my body and in the folks that I've worked with who have reflected back to me, the difference is it's obvious,
For
and
sure.
so there's so much more lightness and spaciousness and like your body relaxes
Yeah.
with the high frequencies, with the joy, with the peace.
Hmm.
And from there we can do so much. It's super hard to do much of anything
Hmm.
when you're in those lower frequency
Yeah.
states.
Yeah. And I can feel that as you're talking about, even let's say the difference between shame and anger, because those are both often categorized as negative emotions, but there is like when we speak about shame, there often is this kind of stagnancy and just like I can't move, I can hardly get up. And when you get to anger, there's a movement in it. There's actually a will to movement. Like I want to yell, I want to do something.
I'm smiling so much because anger is such a call to action.
Hmm.
It and you know, recently, even in my life, I had to make a really, really, really hard choice of ending my marriage after moving to Puerto Rico. And I had seen Sue. I had been avoiding her because she reflects the truth to me, and a deeper part of myself had known you need to leave, but I couldn't face that truth. It was too painful.
Yeah.
But finally, I reached a state of willingness and I saw her. And it was, my spirit was saying the same thing it had been saying for a while. And I was like, okay, I surrender to this truth. I don't know how to like take action here. But I honor that this is the truth now. Eyes are
Hmm.
open.
Yeah.
But even still, part of me was negotiating with the universe. Like, can you just give me a sign that this is really in my highest good?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
just one more. I know you've given me enough of them, but I just need one more. And so the next day, I go to a yoga class at these ruins, and on the ocean, it was beautiful. And a woman who I had met the day previously, so basically a stranger, invited me to do an oracle card reading with her after class for fun.
Hmm.
And two cards fell out of the deck for me, and they were anger and receive. And I bawled my eyes out as this stranger read the meaning of these two cards to me because it was everything to the T that Sue and I had talked about the day previously. And with
Mhm.
the anger card, it said, this is your invitation to take action now. Like, anger is not unspiritual. It is an important signal that you need to do something different. You need to take charge, you need to set a boundary, whatever it is. And it
Mhm.
was almost like it was like the permission and confirmation I needed to say, okay, I do have to take action. The second card was receive, which I'm so grateful to have been given this card, because this was also the part of the energy session with Sue that was the hardest for me, which
Yeah.
was that I believing that I really truly deserve a happy life, making this decision because I felt so guilty about it. I'm leaving someone that I love deeply. Um, and I have always struggled to feel really worthy, deeply, truly rooted in worthiness of
Mhm.
receiving goodness and being happy and all of those things. And so to receive the receive card and to be told that there is nothing I need to do or change about myself to receive the gifts of the divine, of the universe, of life that are here for me, that I just need to be open to receiving them, and that's it. I mean, it was a bit embarrassing to be crying in front of this stranger, but it was such a profound experience that I just didn't care.
Yeah.
Um, and so my life has changed. I mean, I've been going through a massive, massive time of transition, moving to this island, choosing to leave my life partner. Um, but I finally feel that I am aligning, I'm doing that next right step. I am aligning my energies with my highest good. I'm surrendering to the hard truths that are being presented to me. Um, and I feel, it's hard. Things are
Yeah.
not always easy, but I also don't expect them to be. I have to pick my pain in life. I can pick the pain of staying in a situation that isn't, at the end of the day, good for me and is contributing to continued illness. Or I can pick the pain of leaving and making a big change and figuring out how to do this on my own.
Yeah.
So I picked that. I picked that, and
Yeah.
it's feeling much more expansive. I'm accessing more joy and peace and self-acceptance than I have in a long time. So
Awesome. I like those words, aligning with and surrendering.
it's such a it's such a surrender. Healing is a surrender. It's a surrender to the fact that the past has happened. It's a surrender to the fact that you are who you are, and there's parts of
Mm.
yourself that you might not love or that might piss other people off or annoy them. But
Yeah.
surrendering to that, being okay, and the fact that everyone is that way too. Like, it's not just you.
Yeah.
Um, it really opens the door for acceptance and allowance. And I think when we're in a state of allowance is the opposite of control, right? So if we're in
Yeah.
the opposite place of control, which is where the ED lives, we're doing pretty good.
Mhm. Yeah. I want to rewind a little bit too. You were talking about there's this about everything that we experience happening at a more subtle energetic level beforehand. And you had described how we might think some thoughts that then trigger painful emotions like shame or whatever else, which then affects our body and also how we act. Where and we had gone into that when we were talking about the physical movements like that or the finger thing. We're in this cycle of like the thought emotions behaviors. That's a an old cycle or very familiar in cognitive behavior therapy. Where would you say the energetic level, I don't know, falls in that cycle? Or is it a shift that's happening more subtly before thought? Is it a shift that's happening alongside all of these changes? Where does it fall in this cycle if it can be organized in that kind of?
It's a great question. And I think the ancient yogis have the answers. And I think if you were to look at the work of like Sadhguru, like he would probably be able to explain that the energy origin much better than I can. But I do feel that there, and sometimes it's referred to like ether, like
Yeah.
it's like the non-physical, if we're talking about like the koshas, right, of in yoga, the 5 energy bodies of the human organism. They start with the physical, and each level is progressively less and less physical and more subtle. That's why they're called subtle bodies.
Right.
And so within that system, I think you could kind of better understand using the koshas
Yeah.
where the energy really starts and where it shifts. But I do feel that there is something shifting before thought. And then the thought is kind of the translator, right? Because the mind is translating whatever that energy is into thought, those literal impulses in your brain. It's incredible
Yep.
that we can do this, by the way. It blows me away thinking about our experience here as humans. And we really, I mean, we a lot of us really suffer. It's hard. It's a simple life, but it's also complex. And if we get too in the weeds, and if we're not present,
Yeah.
it doesn't do us a lot of good. But to
Yeah.
go back to what you brought up about cognitive behavioral therapy, coaching and what I do with my clients really is in essence a different form of cognitive behavioral therapy. And I think that can cause some controversy with therapists as well. That makes therapists a bit uncomfortable. I think they're, and I understand why, but there can be some gatekeeping in therapy. And I think it's a shame just because there's been healers on this
Yep.
earth for thousands and thousands of years, and none of them went through a master's program or a PhD program to help people transform their lives and feel better about their existence.
Yeah.
So I am grateful that coaching is becoming more mainstream.
Yeah.
And I just think it does add a level of needing to be cognizant as a client seeking a coach, considering their experience and certifications and to protect yourself from harm. And then, every coach, they're still, if they're a good coach, then they care about not harming you and they care about your well-being and they care about staying in their lane, and not trying to do the jobs of, clinicians or whoever else it is.
Yeah.
So
And the therapy world is so limited. I think I'm a therapist, and I think anybody who is has seen people who've cycled through so many treatments. So it feels so like we can't, nobody has a monopoly on healing. And it's very clear that we don't have it all. So we need an expansive approach to it that allows for different types of healing. My I know we have to start wrapping up soon, but when I'm thinking about the ener where does the energy fall in this system, it's also a practical question because when I'm like, when you're doing, and I keep coming back to these movements, what then happens to the thoughts, emotions, behaviors? Does it, because if we're creating this energy with our thoughts, then maybe if you're clearing it up physically, and I've seen this actually with a past student when I was working with kids whose grandmother was an acupuncturist and she had gone for treatment and like walked in like looking great, and then it took like a few minutes till we were back in our old patterns. But it feels almost like if you're clearing something physically, if that can be done, and then the thought patterns or what's underneath it is still the same, like you can constantly keep recreating those frequencies, as you call them, or those emotions. So what does navigating that look like?
So it comes back to yoga, actually. And if we understand what yoga really is, right, it's the union of body, mind, energy, the 3 kind of dimensions of the human system. It comes back to mind and and understanding that I am not my mind and I am not my body. I am. And that is non-physical, that is transcendental, that is beyond space and time, that is my pure consciousness, energy, just physics laws, right? Energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed. So my energy that is within my current system has certainly preceded this lifetime. I don't know in what ways, but it has been transformed into my human being. Um,
Yeah.
and if we understand this, then we can bring it back to, okay, I am not my mind, so I am not these thoughts. And okay, who's thinking me right now? Am I thinking me? Am I thinking these thoughts? Why would I be thinking these thoughts? Do I want to think that I'm not good enough? Why
Hmm.
why would I be thinking that? Is that true? Okay, no. So it's yoga is really the process of becoming aware of the mind. You become a scientist of yourself. It's the science of yoga is a systemic way to observe and then make changes to your way of being. And so if you can learn to work with the mind, if you can understand that, okay, I'm not my intellect, I'm not my ego, I'm not my identity, I'm not these things. And these are different from my brain, right? I've got my brain and I've got my mind, and then I've got this energy that's like powering it all.
Yeah.
What is that? I
Mhm.
am. And so it's a lot. I think
Mhm.
for people to conceptualize, and it's taken me 12 years of knowing about yoga, knowing about these ideas, to really start understanding them and utilizing this knowledge to be the boss of my mind instead of
Mhm.
being constantly bossed around by this bully inside of me who's my ego.
Mhm. Yeah. I feel like a lot of these concepts are being translated into uh, like the language of science, but in third wave cognitive behavior therapies, which are mindfulness, acceptance based, it sounds like what you're describing is like the self as context, where we talk about there's a self that is both larger than and capable of holding uh, the aspects of our experience, like you're describing.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, very cool. What do you want to leave our listeners off with?
Oh gosh, just if you're struggling right now, keep going. Be kind to yourself and keep going. Like, I really didn't believe it was possible for me to experience contentment as a human. I have been through many years of my life feeling that the human experience just is not for me. It's just too hard. I'm just defective, I'm just different and I can't do it. Um, and I feel very different sitting here today, and life looks entirely
Oh,
different for me. And so if you're in that place, just keep going. You're no different than me.
awesome. Thanks so much, Haley.
Thank you. This was so lovely.
Where can people find you if they're interested in working with you or want to know a little bit more about what you do?
They can find me at kosanacoaching.com. I am on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn, Kosana Coaching as well. Um, what else? Oh, I've got a really exciting group coaching program coming up. It's for people really in a variety of stages of recovery, but who are looking for community. They're looking to release the shame. They're looking for a combination of like psychoeducation and practical tools to move forward in recovery and, get on with the business of living and being present and that being an okay experience. And that will be through yoga for eating disorders
Mhm.
with Jennifer Kreitzwas. So that starts
Very cool.
April 9th and is a 6-week group.
Awesome. Very cool. Send me the link to that and I'll put it in the show notes as well.
Will do.